you could draft him as a flyer, and then all of a sudden they have him starting at fucking quarterback. You plug him in your wide receiver. It's fucking all set. And like, how do you not see that, Walsh? It's perfect.
You cracked the code, dude. You figured it out. Mohamed Sanu, New England Patriots starting quarterback.
Total lock.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah! So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the one, the only, the D. Oh, wait, no, that's wrong. That's the wrong introduction. I'm here with Vinny Gonzalez. Vinny, how's it going, dude?
Fuck, man. You can't lead with like a tease of Don and then it's me. No one is going to be pumped about that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I fucked that up. You want to like lead with like the what is it? Under promise, over deliver. There we go. Yeah, my brain couldn't think of it for a second, but you nailed it. And I did the opposite. So you're welcome, listeners. It's just me and Vinny again. There you go. But we are here for part 2 of the AFC East preview. So that's going to be the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. If you did not hear part 1, make sure to check it out on the podcast app of your choosing. That will be the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. And while the Jets may not have a ton of fun to offer, I think the Bills is a fun discussion and a fun team. So we're going to get into, I guess, some interesting things with these teams because, you know, we were just discussing before hitting record on this. The Patriots are just an absolute enigma of a team, and we don't really know what to think of them. And Miami is a team that, was very bad last year, but also got really fun towards the end of the year and now made what I think are a ton of good moves. So I'm interested in Miami. I'm interested in New England, and I think it's going to be a very, fantasy or not fantasy, I think it's going to be a very interesting year in the AFC East. So let's just jump right in. Do you got anything to add before we go for it?
No, man, let's do it.
Fuck yeah. All right. New England Patriots coaching staff has not changed. Offensive coordinator is still Josh McDaniels. Bill Belichick and his son Steve are obviously there. So this is the team that won the division last year, 2019 record of 12-4. And now the over-under for their 2020 win total is 9.5 points. And that's with losing Tom Brady, which is bizarre to me. I don't know about you, but Jared Stidham, Brian Hoyer, Brian Lewerke, and Jamar Smith, those last two are undrafted free agents, I believe. That's the quarterback room. They had Cody Kessler in there for a little while. He's gone. But, I mean, like, are we giving Belichick too much credit?
Dude, I'm going to say this so much. I don't fucking know. I think he deserves all the credit that he's given, but to have that win total designated by Vegas that with these two, like Brian fucking Hoyer and Jarrett Stidham, like it's really, I have no fucking idea what to think. Their defense is fucking great, but can they even get like an ounce of Tom Brady out of either of these guys to make them at least like game manager-esque to stay in these games, to stay competitive, and then to win over 9 games? That's going to be a really impressive feat, I think, for either of these guys. Because, I mean, it's obviously going to be Hoyer or Stidham outside of like a Cam signing or something like that. So maybe they're banking on that secretly happening, and then everyone's under is fucked. So who knows? Because they still could add people, even though they haven't done it now. But right now, what we're sitting and looking at is mind-blowing.
Yeah, and let's talk about that defense real quick, because it was a very dominant defense last year. It was the number 1 defense by Football Outsiders DVOA, number 1 in pass defense, number 6 in rush defense. So just all in all, very, very dominant. In terms of the secondary, they didn't really lose anyone. The big contributors they lost up front were Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, and Danny Shelton. But they did make some moves to sort of try and, replace those players. So I'm not looking at that as a major downgrade in personnel, but let's talk about defense in general. Last year, the Patriots had a fucking easy schedule. At the point in the year when the Patriots defense was like, you would trade like a wide receiver 3 for like straight up for the Patriots defense, they had been just like rocking easy teams and putting them into the ground every week. They had a pretty easy schedule last year. I don't think that necessarily is going to benefit them as much this year with like we talked about, the division has gotten better. And I don't know if like it's that much better, but the division is not as bad as it was last year, I don't think. Another point just in general with defense, defensive stats and defensive rankings and defensive dominance is not as sticky year to year as offense is. And intuitively this makes sense, right? Because a defense is based on 11 guys coming together, executing the scheme correctly, the scheme being good, and the players being talented. And offense is much more driven by one person being the quarterback. And, obviously there are a lot of different factors that go into that. But just in general, there is no player on the defense that has the same amount of value year over year as the quarterback on the offense. So just naturally, a defense is going to be a little bit more inconsistent from year to year based on injuries, scheme change, player change, just natural regression, those sorts of things. And one more point I want to bring up is the turnover differential. And don't quote me on the exact number, but I believe the turnover differential for the Patriots last year was plus 21. So they had 21 more turnovers than they forced 21 more turnovers than they committed. That's also a stat that doesn't necessarily stick year over year and is likely to have some sort of regression. And I don't think it's going to regress to where they're minus 21, but Jared Stidham's going to throw a couple picks because he's a second-year quarterback, and the defense isn't going to be as prolific as it is last year, or as it was last year. And I think the defense doesn't have to go from being like the best defense in the league to being to being a bad defense in order for this team to win less than 9.5 games. It just has to go from being the best defense in the league to be like the 8th best defense in the league. And all of a sudden you're sitting at 7 wins or 6 wins or whatever it is. And like that seems kind of likely to me. So I don't know. I don't know if you have opinions on that, but that was sort of my rant on this defense.
No, that was very well said, dude. Because as an owner of the Patriots defense in our main league, I was badgered all season for trade offers. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to trade this defense to you for anything I'm getting back? Like, I need something of value, and you are getting a defense. Like, none of it ever made sense. And then I think people put a lot of value in it when it's really matchup based, and we really don't know what defense is good until the season starts. Like you said, 12 different dudes got to work together. Totally different than offense. Obviously, it's defense. And then how many times have we fucking seen people overdraft defenses? Every single year we say, do not do it. You just pick up a good matchup and then kind of hope they stick. That happened with the Patriots, and then all of a sudden people are thinking like, what a godsend. I can't wait to do this next year again. No. It doesn't work like that. You find as the season gets closer, you have a much better idea of who's going to be good, who's going to be bad. You project it out a little bit, maybe a couple weeks. You take that team very late. You do not overdraft defense. You do not take them anywhere before the 10th round. Don't even touch it. And it's just there's so much differential that happens fantasy-wise with defenses. It's absolutely insane. So be very careful with that.
Yeah, and this is that's a great point in terms of like actually playing defenses. Like, you can look at the Patriots defense and be like, I want to draft them, in the 8th round or whatever. But the Patriots weren't expected to be this defense last year.
Exactly.
I had them in one league and dropped them after week 2 because I was like, I'm streaming defenses and they have a bad matchup in week 3. And like, obviously that was fucking stupid in retrospect and didn't work. But like, defense is not predictable. The top defense drafted like 3 years ago was the Rams. Like last year it was like the Bears were the defense that everyone was like, The Bears are the best defense in the league. And with same thing, like I said, is possible with the Patriots. The Bears defense wasn't bad this past year, but instead of being the overwhelmingly best defense in the league, it was like the 6th or 7th best defense. And that's a huge difference in terms of like the quality of the defensive fantasy production and also just the overall effect on the team. So the moral of this story is bet the under, I guess. but that's where we're kind of at. So with that rant and diatribe and tangent out of the way, let's talk about Jarrett Stidham. He's going as quarterback 32. Do you have any sort of idea how to project Jarrett Stidham? I'm guessing the answer is no.
Absolutely not. Anyone that does is fucking like an insane person. You cannot prepare for this whatsoever. And then if by some weird move that they just start Brian Hoyer, how could you be excited about that offense? You can't. So Stidham is applying that unknown factor where it's just oh, that could be sweet. He'll dump it off to Edelman a bunch. He'll get a bunch of targets. That's my best guess. And it's not a good guess because I don't know anything about Stidham. Does anybody really know a lot about Stidham?
The Patriots are comfortable with him, apparently. That's about all I got.
Oh, my God.
But you mentioned Edelman, so let's go right to him because he's the one guy on this offense that I think might actually be a little bit undervalued this year. Edelman last year finished wide receiver 9, and that's in PPR points per game. That's not in overall points. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the top of the other one. These last year's statistics that I pulled were in points per game. And PPR points per game, and the sample size was players with 8 or more games played. So that's where those numbers are from in case you check fucking whatever source you use and tell me Julian Edelman was wide receiver 12. It's shut the fuck up. He was wide receiver 9, giving the metric that I'm using. He's currently going off the board wide receiver 31, 73rd overall. I know Brady to Stidham is a huge downgrade. And I know Brady and Edelman had really, really great chemistry. Stidham, you would think, would want a security blanket like Julian Edelman, particularly given the talent and experience of the rest of his pass catchers. To me, Julian Edelman's – we said Jamison Crowder's a lock for 120 targets. Julian Edelman's a lock for what, 140, 150?
Yeah, I would say so. And that's the way the Patriots run their system. They do a lot of intermediate, over the middle, short stuff. An outside guy hasn't really been relevant in some time for the wide receiver position there. And I think Edelman's, like you said, he'll be the rock for the offense. It's, easier targets down there. And it just seems like the one logical thing I can draw from that is just Edelman will be there. Edelman will get it done. And is being undervalued.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The other wide receivers that are within I think the realm of potential starters are N'Keal Harry, the second round draft pick from last year. He started off the year injured and just kind of never got off the ground after that. You have Mohamed Sanu, who was traded for midseason, had one big game and that was kind of it. And then they signed Damiere Byrd, who was one of the outside wide receivers for the Cardinals last year. Didn't really do a ton for them, but was on the field a lot. I don't expect him to start over either Harry or Sanu. So I think, the general choice will be the receiving core is going to be Edelman, Harry, and Sanu. N'Keal Harry's going wide receiver 62. Mohamed Sanu is going wide receiver 82. Are you interested in either of them?
That's confusing to me, though. I feel like it should be swapped. How many times have the Patriots drafted a wide receiver and it just never fucking pans out ever?
I guess, but I mean, Harry's a guy who a lot of people liked, and he was derailed due to injury last year, so I'm kind of willing to write off his rookie year. I think he's a guy that they would want to really give a chance to see if he can do something this year. So I'm with that order. I'm with Harry being the guy to go after over Sanu, just because I think we know what Mohamed Sanu is.
I like Mohamed Sanu, though. And they did trade a second-round pick for him, and he was injured at the time, too, with that nagging ankle thing, which got taken care of in the offseason, should be healthy now. So that was definitely paining him. I think he was just gutting it out to see if, they can get it done for the playoff stretch, try to get to the Super Bowl. But if Sanu is healthy, I'll take a healthy Sanu over N'Keal Harry any day. So if he's going later, I'll throw a dart on him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to change my opinion based on what you said, but what you're saying makes complete sense. And I think it's okay to fall on either side of that coin. You're right. He was traded for a second-round draft pick. He is a guy who has had some success in the past. And if he becomes the primary outside guy, then there's a chance that he can be a guy that you can plug into your lineup some weeks. And he's completely free at this point. So
also,
yeah.
You could draft him as a flyer, and then all of a sudden they have him starting at fucking quarterback. You plug him in your wide receiver. It's fucking all set. And like, how do you not see that, Walsh? It's perfect.
You cracked the code, dude. You figured it out. Mohamed Sanu, New England Patriots starting quarterback.
Total lock.
That's honestly like, if I'm Josh McDaniels, I'm definitely like drawing up some weird packages now.
Could you imagine they come out like, remember when they got fucked up by the Dolphins like all those years ago by the Wildcat? And that's all they run this year. It's just Wildcat with Mohamed Sanu. Stidham's like always out left.
I would like suck Bill Belichick's dick. That's like that would be like the funniest thing to ever happen in the NFL.
They win 3 games and all they run is Wildcat.
Oh man.
God damn.
Well, I think that'll do it for the wide receivers. If Mohamed Sanu becomes a Wildcat quarterback this year, just remember Vinny called it on June 4th. It is the 4th, right? Or the 3rd? I don't know.
4th.
It's the 4th. All right. Vinny called it on June 4th. Let's move to the other pass catchers, specifically the tight ends. For years and years and years, the whole thing was, Tom Brady loves the tight ends. The Patriots love throwing to the tight ends. Wrong. The Patriots love throwing to Rob Gronkowski and other talented tight ends. The Patriots had the fewest amount of targets to tight ends in the NFL last year. Belichick is smart. Everyone should have seen this coming. Belichick is smart. He's going to tailor his scheme to his personnel. We've seen years where they've been a run-first team. We've seen years where they've been a pass-first team. Belichick is smart. He's going to figure this out, which is making me upset that we just told everyone to bet the under. But anyway.
He won't figure it out that much.
Okay, yeah, he won't figure it out to the tune of over 9.5 wins. That sounds good to me. So anyway, in the tight end room, we have Matt Lacoste, the second-year player, and then they drafted 2 tight ends, and this is interesting because they actually traded up for both of the tight ends. So first we have Devin Asiasi, who is a third-rounder. He was the 27th pick in the 3rd round out of UCLA. He's a guy who, can play inline tight end. He can be split out wide. He can play from the slot. He's a little bit versatile. Just a guy who you would think they would try and plug in and use in as much ways as possible right off the bat. The other tight end that they traded up for was Dalton Keene, who went the 37th pick in the 3rd round out of Virginia Tech. And he is more of an H-back prototype. And that's not a position that the Patriots have really featured in the past. When they've had the 2 tight end sets, it's been sort of like an inline guy and a move guy. It seems like right now they're kind of going for a different archetype, and Josh McDaniels might be changing his scheme a little bit. But Dalton Keene kind of profiles, or at least what he played in college, was more of like a Kyle Juszczyk role, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I don't know if any of that is fucking fantasy relevant, even a little bit.
Probably not, but very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. In terms of guys getting drafted, I said to Vinny I was only going to include the top 300 draft picks in ADP in this, but Devin Asiasi was number 301, so I figured we might mention him. He's going off the board at tight end 37. So, no one is really looking at this as a fantasy relevant situation. I think if anyone is going to emerge, it'll be Devin Asiasi. But again, rookie tight ends rarely emerge as fantasy relevant, and the quarterback is not proven. And there's also 2 other tight ends on the roster. So don't bank on it.
Yeah, I got nothing.
All right. Let's move right on to running backs, where they're bringing the band back in terms of the running backs, all 5 of them. Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead, Brandon Bolden, who generally plays special teams other than when he vultures a touchdown randomly, which is always very funny. And then the second-year player, Damian Harris. Currently, Michelle and White are getting drafted around the same time, RB 32 and 33, respectively. And then Damian Harris is getting drafted as running back 69. Nice. Mm-hmm. Burkhead not being drafted, which I was going to say is interesting, but I don't think it actually is.
Yeah, I don't think so. As long as James White is alive, and playing, Rex Burkhead, I think, is kind of a non-factor.
Yeah. So, given the Stidham situation, do you have confidence in any of these running backs?
Not at all. Like, we tried to predict very stupidly last year that, like, Sony Michel would be a concrete pick. The Patriots will finally get their shit together, have a good running back that you can depend on in fantasy, and it was just like a total, kind of clusterfuck. Something we should have saw coming, but I think, especially me in the offseason, I was like I usually stay away from Patriot running backs, but just Michel just seemed more appealing. I don't even know why, because nothing really changed. They still have like a massive backfield, but I just feel like it's the same case now. Like, Michel is a solid football player, and they will use him as such on the team.
Yeah, drafting Michel last year, which like I also did, and I bought into the hype a little bit, was absolutely like the dark helmet, like fooled you moment where it's where you're just like, bad. Fuck, I should have known. Like, how did I get this stupid?
Yeah, it's like I've always said fuck that, and I tricked myself in like 3 leagues. I'm just like, why are you an idiot?
It's like Rodgers saying to wait on defense every year and then drafting the first defense in like the 11th round. That's what we did with Sony Michel this past year. And even this year, like, I'm trying to like reason my way through Patriots running backs. And part of me is like, the quarterback sucks. They're going to want to, or like the quarterback, I don't want to say sucks. I don't know if he sucks. The quarterback situation is unknown. They're going to want to run the ball a lot. Sony Michel might be a good value based on that. The offensive line isn't bad. Like, cool. Also, like, they might not be that good of a team. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. James White is a great, like, receiving valve out of the backfield. Like, I can make that argument as well. And both of those are completely hypothetical, and I have no idea which one is more realistic.
And what sucks is they're right next to each other. That's how much no one knows. Like, it's just like creeped up to that point. It's just like, I don't know what to do right now. So, yeah. I mean, those points are all really valid. And I think the way the Patriots play is like pretty much in line with that. If it's a good matchup for the rushing attack, they're going to run Michel 20 times. If the defense has trouble stopping pass catching running backs, James White game. So if you take one of these guys, you're going to have to take that into account. And when you're playing your matchups, but like, they can obviously just have a bum game and the Patriots fuck you some other way. It's very hard to trust anyone on this team. And especially with all the unknowns, no Brady, there's no, even with Brady, it was very hard to do. So now that they have not a Hall of Fame quarterback, it is very, very difficult to gauge any of this offense.
Yeah, 100%. I think, if you're looking for safety, James White is definitely the one who offers more of that. And I think Sony Michel offers upside. No, I think James White offers the floor. I think Sony Michel offers the upside. If this defense is elite again and Jared Stidham is good to, somewhere from like average to like very good, then like Sony Michel offers the kind of ceiling in the sense of Mark Ingram ceiling,
Okay.
But that I don't think that's the likeliest outcome at all. I think the likeliest outcome is the defense regresses and Jarrett Stidham is whatever, and everyone kind of like Sony Michel ends up pretty much worthless, and James White becomes a low-end RB2 flex option.
Which, not to discredit James White, I think that's what we kind of did now, but he's been great, for many years. And it's just kind of, you got to not pick and choose because it's really tough to do that with James White. But like when you need him and you plug him in, I feel like very rarely he lets you down, I guess. Like you said, I think you're right. With the floor. So that was a good point. With Michel, I feel like he has a baseline floor, but that's it. His floor is his ceiling.
But I mean, I don't know.
It's so tough, man.
I think the lesson with these Patriots right now is Julian Edelman is probably undervalued. You're not wrong for trying to throw a dart at one of the other outside wide receivers, and just probably stay away from the running backs for the most part.
I would say if you're panicking and you're in the mid rounds, I guess grab one of them.
Oh, dude, either one of those guys is absolutely a pick that you're going to make panicked and then later on be like, fuck.
I have to play him every fucking week.
Yeah, it's wait a minute. Sony Michel is my RB2? Are you fucking serious? But anyway, you got anything else on the Patriots?
Nah. Under.
All right.
Under.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with the Miami Dolphins.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, home of the brutally honest fantasy advice you've always needed.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen, and we got one more team in the AFC East. Yeah, AFC East to cover for you, and that's the Miami Dolphins. So the Miami Dolphins in 2019 were absolute garbage for a lot of the year, and then towards the stretch run, got kind of a good schedule, actually got a really good schedule, and got pretty fun. They Ryan Fitzpatrick started slinging the ball around. Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki were just catching touchdowns, and they finished the season 5-11. Their 2020 win total is now 6. Seems a little low to me. Again, we've alluded to this before, but that's where we're at right now. Even with that fun finishing stretch, the team was one of the worst in the league in terms of total DVOA by Football Outsiders. They were 32nd out of 32 teams. Their overall offense was 27 and overall defense was 32nd. So pretty bad. Now, in terms of changes that the Dolphins have made, head coach is still Brian Flores. That's good, I think. I liked him.
Yeah, I did too.
They have changed both the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. And I think this might have gone underreported because I didn't realize it until a couple days ago. But the Dolphins brought in Chan Gailey, and Chan Gailey hasn't coached in a couple of years. He's been out of the league for a couple of years. But the last time we saw Chan Gailey was the heyday of the Fred Jackson, CJ Spiller split in Buffalo, which was really great. He's known for sort of playing to his players' strengths. He likes a spread offense, and he requires an athletic offensive line in order to make all of that work. Another thing is that Fitzpatrick has clearly had success under Chan Gailey, both in Buffalo as well as the offensive coordinator for the Jets when Fitzpatrick was there. So I'm cautiously optimistic about that. I mean, Chan Gailey is always a guy who I've looked at as a boon to good players' fantasy production. So that's pretty interesting to me. And then on the defensive side, they brought in Josh Boyer, who was their defensive backs coach last year. I believe he is now the defensive coordinator. And before that, he spent a long time as a defensive backs coach in the Patriots organization. So another person from the Belichick coaching tree. And we'll get into that a little bit with one of the signings that they made and how they can use him. But let's start off, I guess, at the quarterback position where the big news was Tua Tagovailoa, 5th overall pick, obviously a guy who is extremely, extremely talented, has shown it throughout his college career, but has also dealt with a lot of injuries. I think the expectation here is that he won't start the year, but also that he will see the field at some point. He will probably take over for Ryan Fitzpatrick at some point during the season. Both of these guys are going late. Quarterback 27 for Tua, ahead of Fitzpatrick at quarterback 29. What do you think about the quarterback room here, which also still includes Josh Rosen?
Poor guy. I feel bad for Josh Rosen.
He just got saddled behind the 2 worst offensive lines in the NFL for the first 2 years of his career, and now everyone's like, this guy fucking sucks. And it's he's a stone-footed pocket passer you put behind the 2 worst offensive lines.
They got a fucking break, man. Yeah, I don't like the Rosen bashing. It's tough. Come on.
Yeah. He got fucked.
Big time. Watch the Patriots just hey, we'll take you. And then right to the Super Bowl. But besides the point. I like them. I really like what they're doing here. I think they're handling it correctly. They're not going to force Tua out too early. I feel like it's going to be like what happened with the Redskins. Like it's kind of going to be like last year with Dwayne Haskins, like a no choice kind of thing. Like, all right, what were we even talking about? Like get him in there. But it's a little different because the injury history and whatnot, that huge hip injury before the draft and all that. So it will be Fitz most likely starting, which like isn't a bad thing. Fitz is fun. Fitz will sling it, and he'll probably keep the offense afloat if you draft any of these guys and are playing them early in the season, much like Parker, possibly Preston Williams. So I like that shit a lot. And once Tua gets in there, I feel like he's going to have a very positive effect on the team. Is it going to take a little bit? Perhaps, sure. Everyone has growing pains, but I like Tua a lot, big fan, and I think that he'll bring life to the team. I really do think that.
Yeah, and I mean, I brought it up before, but like Fitzpatrick has worked with Gailey in the past. So even though it's an abbreviated offseason and, you know, they need to install a new offense, we're looking at a coach and a player that have done well together, that have had success together despite the limitations of Fitzpatrick as a quarterback. So, I mean, I haven't looked at their early season yet, but should Fitzpatrick be in the streamer conversation? Absolutely. Like 100%. So
who do they open the season at?
Let's take a quick look.
Because that would be very ideal.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely wait real hard on that, but I do think, as I said before, that Tua will take over the job during the season, and Tua is also a quarterback that I have a lot of confidence in. And again, not like I'm a scout of any renown or that kind of. Oh, they opened the season against the Patriots and then the Bills, but you know, Tua is a guy that I think. You know, minus the injuries, would have been up there with Burrows for the number with Burrow. I always say Burrows, and it's Burrow. It's not.
I never correct you either because I like it.
Yeah, I feel like his name should be Burrows, right? But anyway, maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. I'm dumb as shit. But the point is, I think Tua is extremely talented, and I think he is a legitimate quarterback of the future for this team. And I also think that, you know, Gailey will build the offense around something where Fitzpatrick and Tua can both potentially succeed in it. So I'm pretty optimistic about this offense. I feel pretty good about it. I think whichever quarterback is in, they are immediately in the streamer conversation depending on the matchup. And yeah, that's kind of where I am on the quarterback room.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the pass catchers in this offense, and we'll start at wide receiver with Devontae Parker, who just got fucking paid. You know, I think last year was the year where everyone pretty much gave up on Devontae Parker. Since he got drafted as a first-round pick, we've all had these you know, expectations of him that he was going to evolve into some sort of wide receiver that, you know, could be counted on, was going to become an elite wide receiver. And I think last year everyone was like, fuck it, it's done. And then he broke out. But the thing is, he didn't break out until the second half of the season. And I think this is falsely being attributed to Preston Williams going out and getting hurt, whereas it should be attributed to math. And I'm going to go on a minor rant here.
All right, I'll sit back for this one.
All right. Sorry, the page that I needed to reference fucking went like 404 error on me.
No.
But here's the point without the exact numbers while I wait for this to maybe reload. Devontae Parker was a guy who was getting a ton of air yards throughout the first half of the season, and he was a guy that the math would have said that he would, you know, regress in that situation where he was not producing early in the season despite his high amount of air yards. But as the season went on, he should have started to catch a couple more of those deep balls. And I think this is the thing that's, again, not realized with Devontae Parker, the same way that it was not realized with our friend Stephon Diggs that we talked about in the last podcast. Devontae Parker's average depth of target, and I'm sorry, I still don't have the correct thing up. I thought I did. Devontae Parker's, now I have it up. His average depth of target was, where the fuck are you? I am so sorry. I'm blowing this.
I'm going to guess 18.6.
No, it was 13.9 yards.
So close.
Which was in the top 20 among the league. So Devontae Parker, during the first half of the season, was used as a deep threat who just it wasn't being connected with. During the second half of the season, he was obviously used a little bit more intermediate and underneath with the absence of Preston Williams. But the math said that Devontae Parker should have broken out towards the end of the season, and then he did. You can look to other guys like Mike Williams, who did this same sort of thing, broke out towards the end of the season after being very irrelevant for a lot of the season. And it was just that he kept getting the same sort of opportunities, but he started converting them. So Devontae Parker, I'm very interested in this year because I don't know whether he's going to be used as a deep threat in this Changeli offense or whether he's going to be used differently. And I think it makes his range of outcomes very, very wide and very interesting. But I do think he remains a pretty good value sitting at wide receiver 25 right now.
Very good points, Walsh. Only thing is looking at like the Dolphins schedule right now, and like we were talking about before with the Patriots defense, very hard to gauge which defenses are going to be good or continue being good. But matchup-wise, cornerback matchups for Devontae Parker suck.
Yeah, I mean, Stephon Gilmore, Trey White.
Oh, my God, yeah. Dude. He even goes to fucking San Fran for Sherman. He'll be at the Rams for Oh, my God, dude. This is – and then Patrick Peterson.
Chargers, Broncos.
It's just you might be waiting for another second-half kind of deal. But is this one of those cases where it's like this offense will be fun and trying to throw it a lot because they might be down in certain situations with Tua? Like it all depends when that quarterback switch happens. But, Fitz is no stranger to throwing it into, a fucking packed ass, like little tight window. So it might be kind of one of those things where you don't want to fear the schedule too much and kind of take the opportunity on more so than look at that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about wanting to bet the over on the win total, but the win total is 6, which means we expect the Dolphins to be losing most games, which means we expect them to be playing from behind for most games. So that's going to lead to volume in the passing game, right? I mean, Devontae Parker had 128 targets last year, and he's getting drafted as wide receiver 25. He was really good last year. I know Preston Williams is coming back, and he didn't break out until after Preston Williams got hurt. But Devontae Parker really showed something, and he got paid like he showed something. Obviously, the organization believes in him. And yeah, I think that's some fucking value for Devontae Parker.
I feel like he's in that middle, also in the probably in the fantasy community where people had so much faith in him for so long and just gave up on him. And then there's that small few that picked him up and played him and are like, all right, I'll draft this guy again. So now his little niche is very minimalized. So I think the believers and hype pieces might be a little, far and few between. So I think you're making a great point. I feel like that it's a huge value, and I think the offense is going to be, fun and exciting.
Yeah. And he, I think we're going to be overall a very pro Devontae Parker podcast because we know Don loves him too. But yeah,
Don is that person I was just talking about in that little Target market area where it's just that guy saved Don's ass. Don owes him. So Don is going to draft him in the 4th round.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going further from Parker, we have Preston Williams, who we were talking about. Undrafted rookie free agent last year from Colorado State, just really came in and immediately became sort of the alpha in that short to intermediate passing game for the Dolphins. Finished as, and this, I think in my brain, and I think in a lot of people's brains, Preston Williams had a better season than he actually did. And it might've been because he was sort of rolling into stride as he got hurt. But during the actual season, and this is by points per game with wide receivers with at least 8 games played. Wide receiver 43, 11.4 PPR points per game. So not anything crazy, but I think that perception does get a little bit warped because he was kind of ascending as the season went on. The game he got hurt in, he had already scored 2 touchdowns. And if he had stayed in and scored another touchdown, I might have won a ton of money. And I'm not bitter about it at all because I definitely didn't stack Ryan Fitzpatrick and Preston Williams and go out to a huge lead in a bunch of GPPs on DraftKings. But
I think about that every time I see his name.
Yeah, just me like complaining to you because he already had 2 touchdowns and then he got hurt in like the beginning of the third quarter.
Yep, you're like a few $100 and he's hurt or he stays healthy and like a couple $1,000. Like,
yeah, that was the thing. I still had a really good weekend that weekend, and it's like if he hadn't gotten hurt, it could have just been exponentially better. But anyway,
his stigma also too, like when the season started. It was such like a bandwagon of hate on the Dolphins, just like, we're never playing a single fucking guy on this offense. And then slowly this guy just kept scoring like in that 9-point range. And you're just like, well, he's not going to fuck you. And they are going to throw a lot because they're always down. And they just got, trashed for the majority of the first half of the season. And then right, like you were saying, right as he peaked, got hurt, and then probably could have had just as good as a fallout for the season as Devontae Parker did, but, unfortunate, just happened to get hurt.
Yeah, so I think he's a guy at wide receiver 51 currently where, no matter what, you're getting value there, I think. And it just seems like a no-brainer type pick. Again, I think just looking at all of this, I'm higher on the Dolphins than people are. But, that is what it is. In terms of the rest of the wide receivers, they still have Albert Wilson, who is going off the board at wide receiver 86. He's a guy who's been, very frequently injured but has a lot of big play potential. Jakeem Grant falls in that same category. And then they still have Alan Hearns. I think the reason that we need to bring these guys up is that Changeli, and, I don't want to make too many assumptions about Changeli's offense in that he's been out of the league for several years. But he historically has spread the ball out. So we're going to have a lot of wide receivers on the field. And he's also historically liked these little gadget players. So guys like Wilson and Grant might have some sort of intrigue. Do you want to draft any of them, or it's just fire? Or
I'm out on that because we've been trying the Albert Wilson thing for quite some time. And, maybe he pulls a Devontae Parker on us, but I don't see that really happening. With his skill set. So I'm going to probably just stay away from that one.
I think that's correct. I think the right move is to target Parker and Williams and then kind of
call it quits there.
Yeah, figure it out from there. If someone else emerges, then good for them. Mm-hmm. At the tight end position, Mike Gesicki really broke out toward the end of last year. And he's a guy that we had sort of been waiting for it with, where, very athletic and it kind of all came to fruition as he got through the end of last year. He's currently going off the board, tight end 14, 126th overall. We mentioned him on on part 1 of the AFC East podcast. The one thing I'm afraid of is Changeli has never historically featured a tight end. That being said, he's known for playing to his players' strengths. And you would think one of the strengths on this team is the fact that you have a 6'6", 250-pound tight end who's athletic as all get out, who can go up the seam or, post up in the end zone or do whatever is needed there. So I think I'm pretty in on Gesicki this year. Where do you stand on him?
I have no argument like one way or the other. I'm really having like a tight end crisis. Like last year officially broke my fucking brain. Like it was, if you were scoring over 5 points, half PPR, like you were a startable tight end. So me placing any sort of value or thought that I did like the last couple of years for tight ends has always been like completely wasted. So I'm having a really hard time getting into like any sort of valuing of tight ends. And I said it a little bit on the last podcast, but like, I don't give a fuck. Do whatever you want. Like the people are going to draft George Kittle, Kelsey all early. That's fine. if you want to get cute with it in the middle, sure. I'm all about like the later guys. Mike Gesicki falls in that. If he falls to me and I'm like wrapping up my team, why the fuck not?
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I do want to bring up some stats for Gesicki from last year. And again, a lot of this is without Preston Williams, but I don't think that should factor too much into it. But so from weeks 9 to week 17, Mike Gesicki only had one game with less than 6 targets. In that game, he had 5 targets. So we're not looking like a crazy drop. I mean, it was a bad game. He had 1 catch for 6 yards, but we're not looking at a crazy drop in terms of like his actual targets in terms of any of that point. Also within that stretch, again, weeks 9 through 17, Mike Gesicki had 5 touchdowns. And he had 3 games where he had 50 or more yards receiving. So not like terribly impressive, but also like my point for tight ends is normally if you can get me 6 targets a game, like fuck it, I'll play you. And that's what his minimum was 6, except for that 1 week where he got 5. And the best week of the season that he had, week 16, 12 targets, 6 catches, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like he's a startable tight end right now, and he's going off the board at tight end 14.
Yep. That's why it's just like it's such a hard thing to grasp when people are going early on tight ends, because there is so much value like that late.
Yeah, and Gesicki's definitely one of the ones to target. I think he's one of the ones to go after, and I'm sure as the offseason goes on, we'll go into this in more detail. But
absolutely,
be prepared for this to be the first out of about 7,000 times that we talk about Mike Gesicki this offseason. So, all right, let's jump into the running back situation. And then after that, we can touch offensive line and defense, because I think both of those are pretty important here. But the running back situation last year for the Dolphins was fucking dire, and it was bad. It was bad to the point that I was touting Patrick Laird. Rodgers was touting like fucking Kalen Ballage at like different points of the year.
Don't forget about Miles the Fridge Gaskin.
That is a joke that like me and maybe 4 other people will get. And man, what a great joke it is. Miles the Fridge Gaskin. Fuck me. All right. So a lot of that, I think, though, is because the offensive line was fucking terrible. Within Football Outsiders stats, they were ranked last in rushing in terms of an offensive line, 28th in passing. You weren't dealing with much talent, but it is telling that Kenyon Drake was doing jack shit with the Dolphins and then went to Arizona and scored 4 touchdowns in a week to knock me out of the playoffs in a league. So
there you go. Thanks, Chase.
Yeah, there's that. So at the running back position this year, they're looking at a combination of Jordan Howard, brought in from the Eagles, and Matt Breida, brought in from the 49ers. And I mentioned Changeli before with the Fred Jackson, CJ Spiller situation, where both of those guys were top 20 running backs in the same year. Do you think there's any chance these guys can end up as both legitimate fantasy contributors? They're going off the board running back 38 and 40 right now.
They're cheap as fuck, and I would be all about that, especially if I'm loading, wide receiver early or trying to like pad the middle of like the middle rounds with any sort of running back depth. You're getting I would assume Jordan Howard would probably be the starter. I would think.
I mean, starter, early downs, goal line,
yeah.
Breida third down, 2-minute drill passing situations, right?
Yeah. Quick side, I feel so bad for Jordan Howard. I feel like he's like the Brandon Cooks of running backs. Like it's just you've been passed around from team to team. You've kind of had like no problem being good, but not really being excellent either. And you're just
he's never done anything wrong.
No, everyone's like, and like we're just like he'll catch a bunch of passes this year, and then like he does, and we're just like that guy fucking sucks. It's like he's a really good running back. Dude's getting like 1,000 yards every season. Relax.
He scored 3 touchdowns in that Thursday night game against the Packers this past year.
Yeah, man, he's fucking elite. But yeah, I completely want to be able to see it. I find that it's difficult to take a team that's like so new. Like it is like this is a brand new Dolphins team. So it's going to be difficult to gauge how they're going to use the running game. But like, as you alluded to with Chan Gailey, like it's entirely possible. It's just going to be hard to sift out. I would be fine if you're taking these guys so late. They can like hang out on your bench and you have time to see what the fuck is going on. So I have no problem with that, depending on like, how the offseason bumps these guys up ADP wise. But it'll be very interesting. The one thing is I don't know where the passing work would go. Jordan Howard, we always wanted it to be. It never was.
It's going to Breda.
And it'll probably go to Breda. Can we bank on that, though? I don't know. Probably not, because the other guys like – even I was gonna say Balaj has been there, but he's terrible.
Dude, but Balaj, Kalen Balaj, Myles Gaskin, and Patrick Laird
irrelevant
can go out the window in terms of this discussion. They're not seeing the field because they brought in two actually good running backs, and good in their roles. But
agreed.
I don't know. I think Braid is a guy who's been very underrated. He's a guy who can catch passes. I'm pretty excited for Breda this year, and I think out of the two of them, despite the fact that Howard is probably the nominal starter and is also going a little bit ahead, I think Breda is going to have the better year. Again, the reason I say that is the win total 6. You would think they're going to be playing from behind more often than they're playing from in front. Therefore, I want the pass-catching running back ahead of the goal line and rushing running back. But that's sort of the reasoning there. I really do think both of these guys can be usable, though, and I think a big reason for that, and we talked about it before, it's going to be hard for new offensive lines to sort of convalesce early in this year. But the Dolphins, they had this terrible offensive line. They did basically everything they can to retool it. They brought in Eric Flowers to play guard, who was terrible as a tackle for the Giants, was – I think like a 7th overall pick and just an awful, awful tackle for the Giants for several years. But really actually played pretty well as a guard last year in Washington, signed a big contract with the Dolphins. They brought in Ted Karras to play center. They drafted Austin Jackson, who's viewed as a developmental tackle, but they drafted him with the 18th pick in the first round. That's a guy they're going to be starting. And then with the 7th pick in the second round, they took Robert Hunt, who had played both guard and tackle in college. And, I don't know where exactly he's going to line up on this line. But another thing, how we talked about the Jets in the last podcast, where the line was terrible and at least they tried. The Dolphins are trying here,
They also are.
They didn't just sit back and say this line is okay. They tried to completely retool their offensive line, and it can't be any worse than it was last year. So if it can get to maybe like a middle-of-the-pack offensive line by the time we're looking at midseason, I think both Breda and Howard could be legitimate threats and legitimate fantasy starters.
I also had to double-check this. They're both 25 years old. So, they're coming into, prime time. So there's no reason we can't expect these guys to be at their best still. So I think that's a vote of confidence towards both of them.
Yeah, 100%. Count us in on both of them potentially being values. We'll see how the offseason shakes out. But as of June 4th, I think we're both getting a little pumped on the Dolphins running backs.
Yeah, it's June 4th. We've said nothing wrong. Everything we've said is totally right about all these teams.
Let's talk a little bit about the Dolphins defense, because last year they ranked 32nd in Football Outsiders DVOA in defense. Another situation where they did not sit back and do nothing. They signed Byron Jones to a big money contract. Byron Jones is a big physical guy, athletic. They still have Xavier Howard, who last year, kind of fell off the map, but the year before was looked at as an up-and-coming shutdown cornerback, another guy who is big and athletic. They drafted Noah, and I'm going to fuck up this name. They drafted Noah Igbenogany.
Works for me.
I think it's right. I could be wrong.
Oh, I think you nailed it.
With the 30th pick in the first round, they had 3 first-round picks. They drafted him out of Auburn. He is also a big physical guy. So they're obviously looking for an archetype in this secondary, and I think they're building the team similar to the Patriots have, where they're building off the secondary being dominant rather than the pass rush being dominant. And, I mean, I'm sure some of that comes from Josh Boyer, their defensive coordinator, is a former Patriots coach.
Brian Flores.
Brian Flores, former Patriots coach. Is he? Maybe I just said that.
Former defensive coordinator for them.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, brain stopped working for a second. And then speaking of former Patriots, they brought in Kyle Van Noy, who is sort of like a unique, weird player that you need to know how to use. But if anyone is going to know how to use him, it's Brian Flores and Josh Boyer because they've fucking coached him. So exactly. That should work. They also brought in Shaq Lawson and Emmanuel Ogbah on the defensive line. You know, these are not spectacular guys, but guys who are solid pass rushers, guys who are going to improve this defense. So the Dolphins really did a lot this offseason, I think, to make themselves a bit better at defense, to really improve the offense in almost every capacity. Like, when I look at off seasons for teams, I feel like the Dolphins almost did the most to improve out of any team in the NFL. But
how could they not, with like all the draft capital they had, all the cap room? Like, they've been preparing for this draft for like the last 3 years. So
and it's also easy to make that jump when you are one of the worst teams in the league
for a while, like for a couple of years in a row. So it's like, unlike, I would say probably the Browns, they're handling this very well. Like, they're finally getting shit done.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see if that translates into wins in 2020 or if it, translates into just being kind of fun some of the time in 2020. But either way, I'm excited to watch it. I think Vinny's excited to watch it. Mm-hmm. Before we let everyone go, Vin, you got anything else?
No, this is fun. It's great.
Yeah.
It's always great to be back. I love it.
Yeah, it's great to be back. It's great to be previewing divisions. What was the one that I set up for next week? Was it the NFC North?
Let me give it a check real quick.
Yeah.
Fuck,
we'll be back with 2 podcasts a week for the foreseeable future, going through the entire off season. And then, of course, during the regular season, we'll be back with the recaps and the previews. But yeah,
it was NFC North.
NFC North. So next week we'll be back with the NFC North. I don't have any guarantee of who's going to be on it, but there's a decent chance it will be one or both of us. And we couldn't be more excited to be back with you guys. So for Vinny, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.